One.
Good morning. This is Dr. Robinson, Superintendent of Schools. Just let me do one other technical thing here, and we'll get started in a minute. I appreciate everyone being here. So again, this is Dr. Robinson, Superintendent of Schools. This is our community conversation, and we're using a different format, trying to take advantage of technology. We noticed that during the COVID period, when we had virtual community conversations, we had many more people able to chime in. And so that's our goal, is to try to connect with the community in a much larger way than we have in the past. As usual, we'll go till about 11 o'clock. As you noticed, and you probably saw in the emails, and also it's on the chat feature. We're using the chat feature for this as well as the email feature. So if you look in the chat box, there's an email address, shen-pr@shenschools.org, in case you want to send in any questions. Also, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I'll look at those questions at the end to make sure that I appropriately address the respective questions that were posed to us. Please note that this is an opportunity to engage in conversation with the community. So we will, and I'm not being crude, but we will delete and mute any vulgar, obscene comments. Not that I anticipate them, but quite frankly, you always have to be prepared for the possibility of somebody bombing our system, so to speak, and trying to take over the conversation. We have a lot of good information to share with you this morning, and it's important for us to do so, because we see the importance of ensuring that the community is engaged and understand the various issues and the various factors that we're dealing with, and so we can move forward together. So that's the whole intent. So just looking at some of the initial questions actually that came in yesterday via the email, a lot of questions, and understandably so, related to COVID, related to masking, related to testing. So I'm hoping to address some of those in the beginning. However, I must tell you, our goal is to, quite frankly, to move beyond the COVID period. I'm not saying that we're going to disregard the implication of COVID. Don't get me wrong, that's understanding. We understand we're living in a pandemic era, and we'll continue to take the mitigated approaches to protect the safety of our students and our staff. So we certainly want to do so. But before I jump into some of the COVID-related comments, I just want to pause. I want to pause and say thank you very much to our employees. It has been a trying time for us. Yes, we have been open now almost 6 weeks. And yes, it's October, folks. We have benchmarks. Like let's get to Halloween. Let's get to Thanksgiving. Let's get to the holidays. So we have those benchmarks. And so here we are, about 6 weeks into the school year. And yes, we're doing a lot of great things for kids. And yes, it's been a trying time and challenge for many people. Some of you probably even saw yesterday some local school districts that were closing their doors because of lack of staffing, be it bus drivers or teachers. And so with that being said, I want to say kudos to our employees. People show up to work, and people show up to work to do good work. So I want to start by simply saying thank you to all our employees. Thank you to our bus drivers, our food service workers, our support staff, our teachers, our maintenance, our tech folks. This morning, tech folks are here with me this morning, getting up on a Saturday morning to ensure that we're up and ready to have this ready for our community. So everyone is pitching in, and I really want to say thank you very much, because you know what? It's easy. It's easy to look the other way and say, I can't do it. But people are saying, send me, I'll go, and they're stepping up to plate. So I really want to start by saying thank you for that, because we do have those challenges, and I'm going to address some of them, particularly some of the busing issues later on. But we have those challenges, but people are stepping up to the plate, and I really, really sincerely want to say thank you very much for that. So with that being said, some of the things related to COVID, some good news. So if you recall, when we spoke about our reopening plan back in the beginning of September, we had a tiered mitigation approach. And as a school district, we had a plan that was based upon transmission rates, how things would change based upon the transmission rates. Yes, the state came in and issued certain mandates surrounding masking and things of that nature, which we're complying with. And I want to put that out there because I know there's a lot of questions, people saying, why are kids wearing masks in recess? Quite frankly with you, it's because we want kids to have recess. We don't want to have 2 or 3 kids 6 feet apart. We want kids to go out and play. And we also know at the elementary level, and we have seen it now, Most of our COVID-related cases are, in fact, elementary age students, which makes sense because those are the students who are largely unvaccinated. Plus, quite frankly, you're the kids. Kids play, kids interact with each other much closer than anyone else. And so we try to take those precautions. And I know that there are a lot of concerns people have about the mental health. I know it. I understand it. And we're trying to balance those things between access to opportunities and the health and safety with the mental health pieces of it. So we continue to monitor those things, and as situation allows, we continue to relax rules. And so more and more as we go into the school year, and more as we take precautions, and as transmission rates starting to reduce, and as we get more flexibility from the state, we'll take advantage of those flexibility. We're also advocating hard for flexibilities. I'm going to start by saying kudos to particularly the Saratoga County Public Health. They have been great partners with us as a school district in terms of listening to our concerns and taking those concerns and trying to figure out what else can they do to help schools keep kids students in school. And so kudos to them for really stepping up. And so as a result of that, there's a process that's developed by the county in terms of reducing the quarantine period, and we're looking forward to take advantage of that. So quarantine right now is typically 10 days with some testing sequence. After day 5, a student may come back by day 7, and we're in the process as a school district to try to set up some testing sites to make it more convenient for parents, and also, quite frankly, to take some of the pressure off our local pediatrician offices. We know that they're being hammered by parents going in for testing and things of that nature. So we're trying to be partners as a school district, partners with you as parents, partners with our local pediatricians, partners with our local health agencies to try to figure out how do we contain the impact of COVID as much as possible. And quarantine is one of those kind of things. Right now, we have very few quarantine situations coming from classrooms as a result of some of the steps that we're taking. The next piece that we're really looking at and working hard, in particular this past week, we had a lot of advocacy conversation to look at quarantine surrounding school buses. Right now, the rules for school buses are slightly different than the rules for classrooms, and that's the reason why we see more cases of quarantine coming from school buses, not necessarily because we have more exposure in school buses, it's just because the rules are different. So we're working right now hard to advocate to see some rule changes. We anticipate some of those rule changes are going to happen, and as a result, we'll see a significant reduction in the number of quarantine. The reason why that's also important, because on the other side of quarantine is we know that when students are not in school, it's a burden on families. And it's also a challenge for us to provide a quality learning experience for our students. At the secondary level, it's a little bit easier because our students could pipe in, if you will, via Google into the classroom for that 1 or 2 days that they might be out. At the elementary level, it's a little trickier because if a student's out, we have to figure out then what's a specific thing the teacher is working on that day, because unlike secondary where students go from one class to another class, at the elementary level, they're in the same space essentially all day. So trying to then plot out an entire day for that young person is a little bit more challenging. And we know that the teachers and administrators at the elementary level, they're working on some things now to try to have some resources available for parents when they're home. But even beyond that, a big part of the quarantine piece is two. One, we don't want students to miss a quality in-person learning experience. Two, we're trying to minimize the impact on families. I know directly, being a parent, and certainly when my kids were little, anytime one of my kids were sick and had to stay home, somebody had to stay home with the child. So we understand that, and we're trying to work hard to try to minimize those impacts as much as possible without jeopardizing the health and safety of our students and staff. So that's one comment I want to make about the quarantine. So stay tuned. We're advocating hard. Kudos to Rebecca Carmen, who's our COVID coordinator here. Kudos to the nurses. I got to tell you, our nurses have carried a heavy burden. And thank you. Thank you to all the nurses for working through processes, working through protocols to make sure we're doing those kind of things. So virtual learning opportunities is something that we want to ensure that when our students are not in person, they're getting a comparable learning experience at home. Again, it's a little bit easier, and I'm not saying easy, easier at the secondary level, meaning grades 6 through 12 versus elementary. And so we're working through those things right now. But honestly, I'm hoping that a month from now, we're not even having this conversation. That's my goal. My goal is a month from now, we're not even having this conversation about kids being quarantined and what's the virtual opportunities we have to provide for our students. That's what we're shooting for, because we hope two things. People are going to be responsible in terms of ensuring they're not exposing themselves to COVID outside of the school environment. And two, we're going to advocate for much more reasonable, much more sensible rules and regulations. So we're doing those things on that side of it. Related to COVID, two other things I just wanted to mention related to COVID. We're starting the process per state mandate to test unvaccinated staff. That started this week. For Shen, we probably have about 9% of our staff and population, so not a very large number of people. And I want to say to those folks, thank you very much for complying with the process. We know for some folks it rubs against what they believe in. However, we also understand it's a requirement that we have to engage in. So I appreciate people complying with the rules to have the weekly tests. And so we started this past Thursday. And we also will start sending out consent to parents to have student tested as well. And we anticipate most of this will be our elementary age students under 12. The reason why I say that, because right now in Shen, I don't have the exact number, but I would say roughly from the kids who are eligible for the COVID vaccine, probably about 75% of those students. And if we start looking at students in the high school level, that jumps up to about 80 to 85%. So many of our students who are eligible for the vaccine already have the vaccine. And so all those mitigating factors will help us move forward throughout the course of the school year. The second piece related to the COVID piece is that we're in the process now of also testing student athletes, particularly student athletes without vaccines. And that's been working very well. And we also, when our students go out of the region for competition, we're doing a test before and a test after. And the reason why we're doing these things, folks, is that we want our students to be able to play and compete. And we don't want to have a situation that because of one student being exposed to COVID, it causes an entire team to miss 3, 4, 5 games, potentially a season. So that's our motivation. Our motivation is driven by providing our students options and opportunities. And that's the reason why we're going through these processes as we move forward. The same way we're trying to reduce some spectator things as we move forward. Again, making sure that the experience for kids is rich. Because if you think about last year, and I use contrast of football games because we just had one last night. Last year football games, we had stands with 300 people in it. This year football games, we have stands with about 2,500 people in it. Our capacity at the football stadium is about 6,000. So yes, we probably only about 50% capacity, but it's a significant difference than the past year. And I show that with you because sometimes people don't see the growth, don't see the change. It's happening. It's happening across the school district, and I'm pleased that, again, that our students are troopers. Our students understand expectations and living up to the expectation as much as possible. Our faculty and staff and administration, and also kudos to the Board of Education. I know that members of the Board of Education are watching this live stream. I've been in communication with them, so kudos to the board for their support. Everyone is coming together knowing that we want every day to be better than the day before, every month better than the month before. And as I said, my hope is that next time we're having this conversation, we're not having this conversation about the same topics because we have moved beyond those topics. That's the hope. And so with that being said, we have some school recognition events being planned right now. You talk about, Halloween coming up. So elementary principals are trying to plan Halloween events to make sure that those traditional type things that kids look forward to actually occur. So we're excited about those things. Those are the positive things that we're working hard to make sure that those things occur in some form or format. Similarly, at the high school level, a lot of conversations, trying to do focus groups to try to talk to kids, to try to figure out what's going on with them, how can we make the experience better for them. And so those things are happening. And those things are part of trying to recognize in that, yes, there is a mental health aspect to COVID. And it's real. It impacts students, it impacts adults. And so we're trying to figure out then how do we support those things as we move forward. So with that being said, I'm going to transition from COVID to talk about some other things. And one other challenge that's challenging right now is the staffing issues. I alluded to it before. If you watch the news this past Thursday, we here at Shen hosted Do You Want to Be a Bus Driver? So this is my plug. Anyone who's listening, if you want to be a bus driver, please, we need bus drivers. We desperately need bus drivers. The reason why I'm really focused on bus drivers, because people don't realize, and well, you probably realize it now, because again, a local school district that had to shut down on Friday is a good example. If we can't get kids to school, we can't get kids to school. And so that's a problem. And so subsequently, focus on drivers is for that reason. We want to make sure that we can get students to school so it's not a huge interruption or disruption to families to drive their kids to school. And so we're working hard on that. We also have staff shortage with substitute teachers. A huge issue for us as we move forward. Has always been an issue, by the way, but just exasperated recently. Could be a result of COVID, could be a result of many other factors. I'm not here to place blame on any one thing. I'm here to talk about the realities of what we need. So if there's someone out there saying that, you know what, I have time and I want to do some work and I want to do some work with the school district, please reach out to us. We have a lot of opportunities to address the various needs that you may have, and you can help us address our needs. So with that being said, I want to just kind of talk about again, you know, I think the thing that helped us as a school system, it helped us through the COVID period last year where there were so many uncertainties. I mean, quite frankly, every week was like, okay, what's coming down the pike from the state? What's coming down the pike from the federal government? And so last year was an interesting time for us. We had to be extremely fluid, extremely limber, if you will, in terms of adjusting to the various protocols. Right now, the protocols seem to be pretty stable. We hope they're going to change, particularly protocols surrounding some of the COVID protocols. However, with that being said, as a school district, we are keenly focused on what I commonly refer to here as our North Star. And our North Star is pretty simple. And I'm not sure if you can even see behind me. We have a sign that's talking about commitment to excellence. The excellence is outside of the screen. But we here at Shen, we talk about our commitment to excellence. And it's not an arrogant statement. It's a statement that implies that every day we're trying to improve upon what we do. And that's an important statement. I just want to pause there so people could appreciate that, because sometimes we get, people get criticized that what they may want, we're not doing at the time, and therefore it creates what they think is a controversial or competitive or combative situation. To the contrary, our goal is to try to improve all the time. And so even like this conversation, taking advantage of technology. So we are bolstering our technology capacity because we saw through last year that technology had a huge impact in terms of the delivery of education. And so we're bolstering those capacities. So now we're looking at technology capacity for our youngest learners from K2, trying to bolster that capacity. So again, we can support students not only when they're here in person, but if, and it's a small f, small I, small f, if we have to ever pivot to a virtual space, that we're also much more effectively do so. So we're looking at technology capacity in terms of how we enhance engagement within the classroom, engagement with families. And so that's a huge investment that we're taking right now. Another big piece that we're focusing on too, and this is actually a K-12 initiative, is a focus on literacy. And people say, well, haven't you always focused on literacy? We have always focused on literacy. But as just like anything else, as research evolves and we learn more about how kids learn, we learn more about how to better teach kids, we're trying to bring all those techniques into the schoolhouse so we can be as effective as we can. And yes, and we're trying to balance it. I recognize that right now people may feel overburdened because, oh my God, I have this to do, that to do, this to do. And so we're trying to find a balance, in terms of how we prioritize the things that we need to do. How do we sequence things so that people don't feel as if it's a layering of one thing to the next thing, versus how do we integrate things as much as possible? So if we bring technology on board, how does technology help do the things that we're doing right now better, versus technology being an add-on versus it's a complementary piece? If we have a change in how we pedagogy related to literacy, how does that interface with what we're doing right now? So I share those kind of things with you because as we talk about some of the big rocks that we are focused on for this year and the coming years, it's important for people to know that we're really trying to figure out how do we also then balance the cognitive load. What I mean by that, we don't want people to just be overloaded because they just simply can't process so many things at the same time, because we know it's not going to be done well. And so we're trying to balance those type things. And I've sat in many meetings with administrators, and that's the conversation. People trying to figure out what's the sequence of things. And so we're looking forward to those things because those are the exciting things that school's supposed to be about. Those are the conversations that we're supposed to be having. Conversations about how we enhance the educational experience of our students. And so we're moving away from the conversation that we had last year about in terms of how we mitigate issues surrounding COVID. We're living in a pandemic period. Okay? That's where we are. And so now our focus is how do we take advantage of opportunities to provide our students with the best options for success. And so that's our North Star moving forward as we look at some of those kind of things. Even things such as continuation of free lunch and breakfast for our students. Those things are it's a burden because we don't have enough staff in food service, but it's something we're committed to do. It just give you a simple example in terms of sometimes people think school think it's always about what kids are teaching and learning. It's the overall experience that kids are having. And we're trying to make sure that stays as a priority for us as we move forward. So we're excited about those things as we move forward. And we also have some opportunities to do those things better. This past year, if you watch the news at all, there's a lot of dollars that came out of the federal government across the state, across the country, COVID-related funds to try to ensure, particularly for schools, that the what they call the learning loss that kids may have experienced during the height of COVID, that we could try to offset those learning loss. So we're trying to take advantage of some of those dollars. And the irony is, and I say irony because I don't think it's funny, because I don't want people to misinterpret my use of the word irony. The irony is this year we got funds for pre-K. And yes, we appreciate it, but ideally, I would love to get more funds for K. As most people know, this has been for some a bone of contention for a while, that Shen, we only have half-day K. And yes, we have probably now upwards of about 200 kids that in what we call our extended day K program. And so we're working on more and more kids having a full day experience. And so this pre-K piece is an interesting piece that we have some of the pre-K funding this past year from the state, and we just recently issued an RFP for that, a request for proposal. And we're hoping that with that request for proposal, next week we'll start looking at we had two proposals submitted, so we're going to look at those submissions starting next week to see, quite frankly, if we could partner with those particular organizations to, again, provide some quality learning experience for our youngest learners. So it's about boosting learning opportunities, but it's also supporting families. So that's one of those neat things that's coming down the pike that I just want to bring to people's attention. So hopefully in the next month from now, we'll have that up and running with some of our outside partners, and that's a pretty excited piece to do. And on the same note, we're still focused on trying to, again, enhance our kindergarten capacity as we move forward. So when we start thinking about, what's the road ahead in terms of where we're going, and it's so important for us to keep that focus, because we can get caught up into the conversation surrounding my belief, your belief, what I call the polarizing conversations or the polarizing ideologies and beliefs, and those things are important, and we've had them. We've had people on both sides of the issue related to masking, both sides of the issue related to vaccination, both sides of the issue related to testing, come to board meetings and express their sides. And that's great, because now we have great appreciation of both perspectives. And with that appreciation, we move ahead. We move ahead to try to find that objective space, what I call the center lane, right? You have your left lane, your right lane, but the center lane is where the action takes place, where we do our work as a school system. So when we start looking at the road ahead for me is 2030, 2035. And you say, whoa, why doing that? I want people to take a step back and think about it. Right now, the beautiful little minds that's in kindergarten. Fast forward 13 years from now, 2035, they're our graduating class. So it's not that far-fetched when we start talking about looking at the road ahead 2030 and beyond. And so because those students are with us right now. And so how do we then start to use some of the federal dollars that we have to stimulate some real seed change, to really start thinking about how do we not only reimagine, but reinvent education, start to do things differently. How do we look at classrooms, even simple things such as starting to change out classroom furniture so classrooms are more engaging. Things such as taking advantage of what technology brings to us. So again, we can then have much more independent students can be much more independent learners. looking at how we engage with each other as professionals. So therefore, we're not using or wasting time in transition versus people connecting with each other in a virtual space much more fluidly than we are able to do right now. Strategic use of those funds become a huge piece for us, because once the funds are gone, we want to be positioned as a system to keep moving forward. So we have some federal dollars that came down again, as I said, as this past year is because of some COVID relief, and we're using those funds strategically, thinking about 2030, 2035 ahead. We're not thinking about 2021, 2022. We are thinking 5, 10, 15 years from now. What will that experience look like, be like? And yes, it's right now, we can only imagine it. But we also have the past to help us frame the future a lot better. And so we're trying to do those things as we move forward. We're looking at expanding school capacity. You know what? The school community is growing. You know, I'm always amazed. I drive around, particularly on the weekends, on a Sunday. Drive around, I'm always amazed to see where the new developments are going in. And so every time I see it, I think, oh boy, more houses, there's a greater potential for more students. So therefore, a greater potential for us to build our capacity. So we're looking at those kind of things. We're still looking at purchasing land. And ideally, purchasing land somewhere in the town of Half Moon. The reason why I'm saying that, because I'm crossing my fingers that hopefully in the next month or so that we'll be able to identify some property. And if we're able to identify some property, to bring it to the voters in May to approve a potential purchase. Again, we don't have anything concrete. I don't want anyone to get too excited. However, it's certainly one of those things we're very intentional about, trying to do those kind of things, because we know that we have to build our capacity for the next 10, 15 years out as well. So it's a challenge, but it also presents a tremendous opportunity for us as well. So those are the kind of things that when we start thinking about the road ahead, those are the things that we really, really want to focus on. So I'm just going to stop here for a second and look at my computer and see some of the questions that came in, because I want to make sure I address some of the questions that came in and use some time to do that appropriately as well. So let me just look at my computer here. So as anticipated, there are some questions surrounding mental health and emotional toll. It's very, very much a real issue, and we're seeing it, and we're trying to support it. We have expanded our counseling capacity to address that. We've expanded our partnership with the Saratoga Center for Families to address that. We have expanded with professional development. We expanded with some classroom resources so our teachers could be better equipped. And so we're trying to do all those things to address the mental health. And yes, same as I said before, issues surrounding masks and concerns people have with that. We're trying to advocate strongly to see some changes, what I call reasonable changes, to ensure that, again, we continue to protect the health and safety of our students and create that balance. And so the mental health piece is a real piece for us as we move forward. So there's a question, an interesting one, and one that I'll follow up with. Someone asked a question related to special education, and particularly drop-off for particular handicapped students who need special pickup and drop-off. And that's an interesting question. And what I'm actually going to relay that to our team on Monday, to see how many situations we have with that, to make sure that families, particularly with wheelchair access, that we have that piece ready, because we know that in the morning, parental drop-off is still a bottleneck. We have a lot of parents drop their kids off, thank you, because it helps us on the bus side of it, and we know that pickup is still a bottleneck at some places. And so that's an interesting one, and I would ask the person who actually put that particular question into the chat if they could actually reach out to my office and talk to my secretary, because I want to understand better the specific situation so we could address the specific situation accordingly. So if that person could just reach out and let us know. I think they said related to Shattuckon Elementary. So I also reach out to Mrs. Ryan next week. But if that person could just reach out to myself or reach out to Mrs. Ryan, principal at Shattuckon, we could try to address that specific issue as well. So, and that's the beauty of this conversation, right? Sometimes people don't know how to and who to necessarily address questions to. And I would say if you're a parent, your principal is your friend. Your principal is your source. Your child's classroom teacher is a good source. Certainly calling my office, my secretary is great in terms of listening and trying to get information and making sure that we get to the right people to make those changes. Sometimes people call my office and say, well, I want to talk to the superintendent. Honestly, talking to me may not be the best thing. You may need to actually talk to someone who's actually going to implement whatever the change that we need to implement. So I want people to make sure they understand that sometimes they call my office and sometimes people get frustrated because I'm not available to speak with them. However, we try to relay whatever the specific issue or the needs are and making sure that those individuals who are most appropriate to address those needs. Similarly, sometimes we get issues coming out of a school building. And someone sent it to me, and I'm telling you, when it happens, I call the building principal, say, hey, tell me what's going on with this particular situation, and often ask the principal to follow up with the parent. And the reason why that's important, and I just want to pause on that piece of it, it's important because we're trying to resolve things at the lowest possible level. If it's a student-related issue, we want it to be resolved in the classroom, in the school building. And so we want to make sure that we keep those things and we're not jumping steps. We're not jumping from step 1 to step 5 versus addressing things in the infancy as much as possible. So that's how things happen. And so when people call the office, again, I want also people, please, we all understand that we all have frustrations and we all have disappointments and we all have challenges. And the people who you're talking to on the phone, they're simply trying to do a job as well. So they're trying to listen attentively. They're trying to make sure that we relay the information to the right individuals so we can address it most appropriately. And those things are important because, sometimes we get people just call and want to scream and yell, and that's not good for anyone. It's not good for the person who's screaming and yelling, and it's certainly not good for the person who has to sit and listen to it because, again, we're trying to build positive partnerships to make sure we address things at the lowest possible level in the most effective way we can. So back to the special ed one, please. That person reach out to my office and or reach out to Mrs. Ryan, your building principal, because I noticed in the chat was a comment related to ShadowCon. So I want to make sure that those things are addressed. So this is an interesting one as well. Again, the person, there's no name, so for people, there's no confidentiality violation, but the person was talking about the completely virtual access and a special education students and in terms of IEP services being provided. And this is one, again, I'm going to ask the individual who put this in the chat if he or she can reach out to Mrs. Mallard, is our Director of Special Education. And if you don't know her direct contact, again, call my office, superintendent's office, and my secretary or whomever answer will try to relay you to the right person. We know that the completely virtual learning, particularly at the elementary level, our students who are in the completely virtual learning at the elementary level, they're part of a regional school through the Capital Region BOCES. So in other words, those students are online and there's a potential that other students across the region might be in their respective class. So it's not a Shen completely virtual learning school. It's a regional school that those students are part of. Yes, we have some Shen teachers teaching in that regional school, but it's a regional school. And yes, we're trying to address all the, be it special education accommodations, the ELL accommodations. So we're trying to address those things as much as possible, recognizing the regional school model. And so if there's some things that's still not happening as well as they should, I'm going to again ask those individuals, those parents to reach out to us. Let us know. Let us know what the experience looked like from your end, so we can try to make the connection with the regional school and make the adjustments accordingly, because we want to try to meet the needs of your students as best as possible, particularly our students with IEPs, to make sure, again, that students aren't having a learning loss as a result of the model that we have in place. So I'm going to ask that parent who wrote that to please reach out to us, and so we can, again, try to more specifically address your question in the most appropriate venue. So I want to keep looking on here. There's some question related to the test negative after 5 days. Yes, we're doing that, COVID test after 5 days, and hopefully next week could be. We're trying to also help parents make it more accessible by doing a testing on campus. I don't have the details at this point. We're still working through those details. So we're trying to do that, one, for ease of access for parents if a child is out on quarantine, and also recognizing that some of our local health providers, pediatrician offices, they're overburdened. And so we're trying to create a balance with our partners, and because we respect and appreciate the work they're doing, and so if we could try to assist with that, and also we trying to also avoid overburdening our nurses too. So it's a tricky situation all the way around. However, we're taking all those factors into consideration, and again, trying to work out a plan that makes the situation at least better for everyone. So we're working through the quarantine piece as we move forward. So people asking questions such as, are teachers required to allow students to log on virtually during quarantine? As I said before, high school, middle school, that's a part of the model. And also depends on what's happening within the class, depends on how number of kids is quarantined. So there are many factors. In fact, we have a protocol here, just want to look at. I mean, there are many factors that we look at when we think about how instruction is delivered. So we're looking at the number of kids. So if it's a whole class versus one or two individual student, we're looking at what's happening in the class at that time. We're looking at the class itself. Because if it's a situation that a child is on quarantine and the day or days is a testing day, it's a whole different dynamics for that young person who's out on quarantine in terms of logging into the class. And so all those kind of things are being considered. And we want to empower teachers to look at the circumstances and figure out how do they best provide services to our students when they're on a short-term period of quarantine. And again, we hope that right now most of our quarantine are 2 or 3 days, particularly with this testing sequence. And ideally, we hope that we won't be having a lot of conversations about quarantining, because hopefully in the next week or so we see some changes related to quarantine on buses, because right now most of the quarantines that we have are coming because of the rule, not because kids are exposed on buses. I just want to clarify that. Kids are not exposed to COVID anymore on buses than in classrooms. The rules are just different. And so we're trying to advocate for similar rules between classroom and buses, and hopefully that will occur. And if that occurs, it changes the game significantly, because our job is to educate kids. Our job is not to quarantine kids, and we work closely with our partners at the county to do it in the most precise way possible, and they have been great partners for us. And again, kudos to the partners of Saratoga County. So we're working on those protocols as we speak to enhance, again, the experience for our young people when they're out on quarantine. Just want to look again at some of the other questions that may have came in since we've been online here. So another question related to mask, and I think I've addressed that already. So someone asked about if the COVID-19 vaccination is authorized for students under 12. Will we require, and the key word to that is require. We don't require vaccination as we speak. The state of New York came out with a mandate that says for students and staff, and starting with our employees, if you're not vaccinated, you need to test once a week. That's required for employees. For students, it's based upon parental consent. And so that's an important piece. Yes, there are local school districts that have required vaccination for all employees, and there are local school districts that have even required vaccination for all student athletes. We didn't go that way. And the reason why we didn't go that way, because quite frankly with you, we looked at our numbers, and probably about 90%, 91, 92 now, because we have more of our employees saying that, you know what, guess what? Instead of testing every week, I'm just going to get vaccinated. So we have more and more people getting vaccinated as we speak, and as that number goes up, the other number goes down. Similarly, we saw a lot of our students, particularly 15 to 18-year-olds, a significant number of those students are vaccinated, and so we didn't want to mandate something. So if it's required at elementary level, if there's a federal or state requirement, yes, we have to comply. And I know that I will get beat up about it, because people will say it's my rule, but it's not my rule. And it's not a cop-out. It's a reality that we have to comply with whatever the rules are and try to do it in a way that's done as seamlessly as possible. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm hearing a lot of news about the potential that by Thanksgiving there could be a vaccine for for students under age 12. And when that happens, we'll see what are the stipulations that come with that as we move forward. So, and if it does occur, we'll also try to create some vaccination sites to make it easier for families. We did it in the height of COVID. We had vaccination sites. We created pods, and we worked with the Saratoga County Health Department, and we will continue to do so if or when the vaccination is available for students under age 12. We'll create vaccination sites to, again, make it easier for families to have access to it. Again, I'm just going to look at the questions that's coming in as we speak. This is, again, seemed like a lot of COVID-related questions. So for anyone who's on the chat and saying, oh my God, can we stop talking about the COVID questions? The reality of it, those are the questions that's coming in right now. So I just want to make sure I'm fair to people. So vaccination and quarantine. Right now, the rule of thumb is almost, and I say almost because it's not always the case, that if you're vaccinated, it's a very, very slim likelihood that you'll be quarantined. Very slim likelihood that you'll be quarantined. So because that's also part one of the protocols. And so that's one of the benefits of being vaccinated. And I wanted to just pause. I had an interesting conversation with a health professional this week about the vaccination piece, because I think it's a misnomer. I think that people think that if you're vaccinated, you're immune from COVID. It has nothing to do with being immune from COVID. It just minimizes the implication, the impact of COVID on you as an individual. And so I just want to make sure, and with that, with the vaccination piece, then we give the leeway that if someone is potentially close contact with someone else, within that 5-day period, if you start to have some symptoms, test. Get a COVID test to make sure that you're not exposed or haven't been exposed and have the COVID virus. So if you're vaccinated, it's very unlikely you'll be quarantined unless you're showing symptoms, and then we go through the process accordingly. So great question. Just want to make sure I clarify that for folks who are listening in as well. The class time piece, I got to tell you, we're very sensitive about that, and that's why we're trying to minimize the amount of time that students are out on quarantine. We really focus on minimizing that. I got to tell you, if there's one thing that bothers me is when I hear, students being quarantined multiple times, because I know that's not a good experience for that young people. And I know it's a huge disruption on families. And so we're working hard to say, let's try to minimize that as much as we can as we move forward. So we're on board with that piece of it and trying to work within the rules and try to modify, work to advocate to see those rules modified in the coming weeks and months as well. So please be patient. We're working through those things as we speak. So again, someone asked about boosters. Yes, there's the boosters right now for those who had the Pfizer, if I'm not mistaken, the Pfizer vaccination, and we're actually working with the county. The county is doing some booster clinics, and we're trying to promote those as well. And so we'll see how that translates. Who knows? Some point in the future, we may host a booster clinic here at Shenandoah as well. So again, we're trying to be partners with our health providers as much as possible. In the transportation area, a couple of questions came in. Transportation in terms of our kids getting exposed on buses any more so than not. No. The answer is flat out no. Capital N, capital O. It's just a difference in the rules when it pertain to quarantine. And so when you think of a bus seat, on the buses, they're using a 6 feet measure. So now you're talking about 1, 2, 3 rows of seats of a potential being quarantined directly back, 3 rows forward and diagonal. So all of a sudden you see one case can have the potential of 10, 12 kids. And I think, quite frankly with you, that's not reasonable. And so we're working with the county, and they've been great to listen and try to put some mitigating factors in place. And we hope that the state is going to listen. So this message is for anyone who works for the state. Please advocate, help us. We need to look at that, because right now that's the pinch point, the Achilles heel for school districts across the state in terms of the quarantine piece. So we could, if we get a good handle on that, we can manage it. Plus, you know what? We start to look at our data. Our data is saying that kids who are being quarantined, they're not coming up positive. And so therefore, let's really have some reasonable rules here pertaining to this. And I don't want people to get me wrong. I'm not anti one thing or pro the next thing. I'm all about how do we provide our students with a safe, quality learning experience. That's the lane I'm in. I'm not in this lane or in this lane. I'm in the squarely in the middle lane of how do we provide our students with a safe, quality learning experience? How do we provide environments that our employees can come in and put in a good day's labor with the type of commitment that we expect from our Shen employees? That's what we're trying to do in the midst of all the swirling ideological differences, all the stuff that's out there, folks. I understand it. I see it. However, we live here in this middle space. And I really want to emphasize that point because that's how we're moving forward. And we're moving forward as a school district in a very positive way. Every day trying to be better. I just want to, again, make sure that, I have Lindsay, who's our public information officer here with me. And I just want to make sure that she's capturing the chat questions and transition them over for me. So I don't want to miss anything that people may have said because I don't want someone to say, I woke up this morning, he didn't answer my questions. And so I just want to make sure that I'm going back, so also looking at some of the chat things and moving forward. And so I think I addressed most of the questions that people had. And if I didn't, my apology, chalk it up to the head, as they say, and not to the heart, because we really do want to have this be an opportunity to engage with our public. So again, I'm just kind of scanning through the chat to make sure that the things that we are talking about are important. So with that being said, it seems like we addressed a lot of the questions on the chat already. And so again, I don't want to linger on people's time because time is precious. And I just want to, again, quickly highlight some of the things because people may have jumped on late that we have been talking about this morning. Clearly, our big focus is moving ahead, looking down the road ahead. Our big focus is looking at what does the school look like in 2030, 2035. It's exciting. It's exciting to me as superintendent to having a vision of where Shen is going. And I hope it's exciting to our parents to know that we're not stuck in the quagmire of the current times, that we really, really are focused on doing looking at some interesting things ahead, looking at using some federal funds to again, position us for continued prosperity as a school district, looking at our capacity, hopefully identification of some land to purchase, to expand some school capacity in the next 5 years or beyond. And so we're looking at some of those challenges and trying to transform them into opportunities. Looking at some big instructional changes, so we're looking at, new resources and various content areas, ensuring that we have best resources in front of our students. We're looking at how do we provide professional development at a time where we have staff shortage. And so it's a tricky situation, right? We don't want to pull teachers out of class for PD and create a situation that we don't have enough teachers in class in front of kids. So it's that balance. And so we're trying to reduce the cognitive load, if you will, for some of our teachers and staff. And so we're looking at some of those kind of things. We're looking at further investment in smart technology. It's pretty amazing how technology has changed significantly. So we want some smart technology in front of our students, smart technology for our employees across the board. And it's not on instructional for everyone. I mean, we want people to have smart technology all the time so we can be much more effective as we move forward. We're looking at simple things such as, staff not ramping up to make sure that our food service programs are up and running and we can provide lunch and breakfast for our students. We're looking at pre-K funding. And hopefully the two partners that submitted the RFP, in the next week or so, we're going to be reviewing those RFPs. And so hopefully we, again, boost the learning opportunities for our young people and support our families more effectively and maybe reduce some of the financial burden that some of our families are paying right now for preschool by some of these partnerships. So stay tuned for that because I'm going to tell you one of the things that we're going to wait, meaning we're going to give more credit towards, particularly when we're looking at some of our families they have some economic constraints and struggling to trying to provide a quality learning experience for their students. We want to ensure that those families have first dibs, first access. So I'm sharing that because who knows who's listening. Hopefully people recognize that that's some of the things that we want to do. Again, we want to create a good balance that focus on equity and opportunities and outcomes. And that word equity is so important because basically we're saying that we're going to treat differences differently. If someone need more to be successful, we're going to try to provide them more so they could be successful. And providing more doesn't necessarily mean giving someone less. And I think that's where sometimes people miss the mark. It's about how do we use resources and leverage resources in a way that we create a better balance in terms of opportunities that we provide for our students. We want to make sure that the quarantine issues are quickly moving in our rearview mirror because we want and need kids to be in school. We want and need kids to be in school, so we're keenly focused on that as we move forward. We keenly focus on providing more opportunities for kids. And yes, and I get people sending me the email. I saw a picture of this. This is, folks, I got to tell you, I would love to be everywhere and police everything. Reality of it is we can't. And I also know the reality of it is that yes, in school, students follow certain rules that outside of schools, they're not compelled to follow. I understand it, I get it, and so when people want to say we're being hypocrites, we're not being hypocrites. We're being realists. And we know that's the reality. I came from a sporting event last night. It was great to see these young people because for 2 years, they didn't have an opportunity to celebrate as young people. And so, you know what? I was so happy to see them celebrate. Did they all have masks on? No, they did not. Was I going to run around and tell all the parents and every kid, no, you can't celebrate because, no. And I say that very respectfully because sometimes people want to criticize us and call us hypocrites because we didn't have kids in recess. In schools, we have more controlled environments. In schools, kids are together in that same space for a longer period of time. And so we're trying to balance all those things to protect the interests of all parties. So I want people to understand those differences. Staff shortage is a real thing for us. Sincerely, if you have time and you want to work, particularly surrounding bus, if you are a certified teacher that has been home for a while because you chose to be and you want to get back into the system, we need tons of substitutes. In fact, quite frankly, if you have any credential in the education arena, we need tons of folks. We need folks in food services. We need aides. We need folks, period. Because at the end of the day, we hire people to do the job. Technology is complementary. People use technology to do the job. And so we want people, good people, to come and work for us as a school system. And so with that being said, I don't want to belabor some of the points. I just wanted to spend some time this morning and again, make sure that we can reach out. And I just want to check one more time to see if there are any additional comments that came in that I'll address before we actually call it a day. So again, I'm just going to look to Lindsay to see if there are any other questions that came in. And she's pointing to me saying it was a transportation question. So has the idea been thrown out to parents if they're comfortable doing carpooling to help ease the transportation issues? So it's an interesting one because it's so if and I know a lot of parents do it. I know some parents in my neighborhood actually carpool with their kids, and so parents do it. As a school system, we can't formally endorse it because you understand why, right? Because if somebody say, well, the school district said this is the only way I get my kid to school, then the liability becomes ours. However, we know a lot of parents do it, and yes, and you know what? And for families that are comfortable with each other, yes, and if you have a system and you know that you can consistently do it, let us know. Let transportation know that, hey, you know what? We have figured this out and we may not necessarily need a bus to stop by our neighborhood because we have a plan. And if families and neighborhoods get together and have that kind of plan, yeah, absolutely reach out to transportation and let them know because they may be able to modify routes one way or the other to expedite the process and or minimize the impact, the staffing impact. So please, if you have some of those systematic ways to do it, absolutely. And so somebody asked, why does the transportation not follow the community bus stop that they say? And so I'm not sure what they mean by the community bus stops, but I got to tell you, bus stops have been modified, folks, because think about it. Transportation in May, June, July, August, try to map out hundreds of routes to try to pick kids up. And they're making the assumption that child who's supposed to be picked up will be picked up. And next thing you know, that family decide, you know what, they're going to drive their kids to school. And so after a while, they decide, okay, well, maybe that's not the best place for that stop to be. So they make the modifications to stops. And the modifications are typically not that significantly different from what it was. So it's different between, was a bus stop in front of my driveway before, now it's down the street in front of my neighbor's driveway. Because we are cognizant of the fact that we're not going to have kids, particularly, we're not going to have kids walking on long, busy roads. So you have some busy roads. You have, be it Grooms Roads or Moore Road, and we're not going to have kids crossing over busy roads to get to the bus. And so we try to go into neighborhoods as much as possible. We try to avoid dead ends because big buses can't reverse back and forth. And so there are a lot of factors that go into place. And so if someone think there's something that happened with that route that's significantly changed and causing a major burden, give transportation a call and have a reasonable conversation with them. Not a yelling conversation, because trust me, many of those places, those people might be driving, and so you call and you're not getting an answer. No one answered my call when I call. Probably because that person's not driving a bus because we have a shortage. And so just be mindful of that as well. And so if there's some significant burdensome issues that you have, give transportation a call, talk it through in a reasonable way, and we try to figure out what accommodations we can make. But I got to tell you, folks, sometimes people want, and this is not necessarily to the person who put that question in the chat, but we see it all the time. Somebody want my child to be picked up and dropped off on this place on a Monday, this place on a Tuesday, this place on a Wednesday. Folks, it's not a car service. It's truly not a car service. I jokingly say sometimes the yellow limousines that we have, it's not a car service, and we're trying to balance it, especially now that we have such a significant shortage of drivers. Trying to balance it, trying to make sure routes are on time. But I got to tell you, there will be days, and it might be more days than not, that your child might be getting home a little bit later. We try to pick up on time so kids aren't standing out waiting for the bus for a long period of time, but coming home might be a little bit later because we're making modifications to routes. And we're really trying to make those modifications and fine-tune those things now, when it's a 65, 70-degree day in October, and not when it's a minus 10-degree day some point in January, February, March. So we're trying to make those modifications now so we have a much more fluid situation as we go into the winter months. And so that's why it's so critical for us to shore up some of our staffing, shore up some of our routes, to make sure that we can be as fluid as possible and predictable, so families could come to expect when the bus will come, where the bus will come, and so there's become a natural progression for folks as we move forward, particularly as we go into the winter months. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, again, I'm looking at Lindsay, who's here with me. I think those were the questions that came up in the chat. And yes, we were scheduled to go to 11, and it's a little bit earlier than that. However, the time slot was there in case we needed it, and I'm not one to waste people's time. So I really appreciate folks taking the time this morning to listen in. I hope that you heard some key things that you hope that when you woke up this morning, you said, I hope the district is doing this, or thinking about that you heard that we are doing those things, or thinking about those things, or working on those things. And again, I ask people very sincerely, engage with us in a way that we can be respectful with each other, engage with us in a way that we can be objective in our decision making, because we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to do the same thing, provide the best opportunities for our students to be successful. And we have done it. We have done it year after year after year. And you know what, folks, we're embracing the challenge. And I really appreciate the parents who send their kids with the expectation for them to take advantage of the learning opportunities that we provide here at Shen. I send my appreciation to our faculty and staff who every day show up, wanting to do a good job. So thank you for that. And I send my appreciation to particularly some of the folks who are in the trenches, our nurses in the trenches every day, dealing with the gyrations of things, our transportation folks who are juggling. You name it. You name it across the board. We have people across the board juggling all the time to do those kind of things. I mean, just to give an example, our technology folks, just think about it. I heard the other day they're trying to get ready, I think it's like 2,700 Chromebooks, when they only have like 10-minute increments to give to kids in transition at the high school, for example. And so people don't even think about that kind of logistical nightmare that these folks are dealing with, and they're gonna make it happen, and it's gonna be seamless to the end users. And that's always our goal. How can we do things that's seamless to the end user? and the primary end user, our students. So again, thank you very much for joining me this morning and putting your questions in the chat. I'm looking forward to future conversations. And please, if there's something comes up, try to resolve it at the lowest possible level. And if it's not done, then move it up a chain, so to speak, and we try to address things. We have to be partners, and I really appreciate you being great partners.